Hey guys, Amir Reiter here, CEO of CloudTask, and today I had the pleasure of having George Lang, Head of Product and Customer Support with Grab, joining us today, and Eddie Bejo, our Head of Customer Success at CloudTask, here to talk about customer support and Grab's journey. George, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're based out of Singapore, right?
Yeah, that's right. Here in sunny Singapore, where it's sunny year-round.
Sunny, yeah. I think we were talking about that. I'm here in Boston now, kind of freezing. Eddie's in Medellin, so we have an international crew on this call. So to those of you guys who don't know who Grab is, Grab has a few different divisions, but it's kind of like the Uber of the Far East. No, George? That's how you describe it?
I think that description, I'll expand on that a bit. I think that's a good description of kind of where Grab started.
Yeah.
So Grab started a few years back in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, before moving down to Singapore, where we're currently headquartered now. So today we've become the leading online to offline mobile platform. We operate in where we began, which was transport. We've since grown into food, logistics, payments with over 100 million downloads. We currently operate in 8 countries and over 225 cities.
Yeah, and I'm looking, I looked at LinkedIn. It's something around 16,000 employees, but a massive workforce, right? Nonetheless, and a huge customer base. I'd love to learn more about some of the main drivers between that drove Grab's major expansion.
Yeah, it's been a lot of us in the company talk about or compare it to being on a rocket ship. That's I think it's pretty applicable to my journey and the company's journey over the past few years. Just watching year-over-year growth, hypergrowth, if you want to call it that. I'd say the main driver for Grab's growth over the past few years is hyper-localization. That's always been a focus since day one, and it's continued on through my time in Grab as well. And what that means is really going into your country, your different countries and your local markets, even down to the city level, and customizing the offering and the services and the operations teams and SOPs and how we deal with our customers, both on the driver's side and the passenger side, to really win over the hearts and minds of our customers so that we become the #1 choice for them when they have a need for whether it's transport, food, to transact in financial services.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And Eddie, I know Eddie's just dying to ask questions. I know he was already chatting away before we connected and picking your brain. Eddie, you're with us, right?
Yes, I'm here connected from the beautiful city of Medellin, also enjoying a beautiful, lovely, sunny day.
Nice. So George, if you don't mind me asking, when did you start with the company?
I started just over 2 years ago, September 2016. So just a couple months ago, hit my 2-year anniversary. In that time, you mentioned the LinkedIn headcount. A lot of those people have come and gone, and we continue to grow to this day. But just to give you an idea of where I joined, when I joined in Singapore, I've always been based in Singapore with them. We started around 400 people in Singapore. So decent sized company already, but I think we're somewhere over 2,000 employees now in Singapore. And then you just extrapolate that, married with the LinkedIn information across our 8 markets to get an idea of kind of how far we've come even in the short 2-year period that I've been in Grab. And that's correlated to the amount. That correlates to the amount of business that we've done as well. The year-over-year increase in rides, and then now multiplied against all the different verticals that we're operating in. It is truly astonishing what's going on out here in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, and I'm sure over those 2 years you've probably seen, a transformation between growth and also now the customer experience, right? And that's kind of probably jumped into the spotlight.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in something, an industry like ride hailing, taxi / ride hailing, just transportation in general. People want to get from point A to point B in a safe manner as quickly, as fast as possible, and in a way that's cost effective for them, whether that means public transit, calling one of our competitors, or calling Grab as well. So what that means is, as the number of transactions that we have, or the number of rides that we serve for our customers increases, the number of potential customer service or customer support tickets that come in also grows in line with that as well. So we've definitely seen an explosion in that area, not just in the rides, but also in the customer support tickets that come in, and how we've managed to handle that over the years has been impressive as well. We've seen a lot of growth in that area from an organizational standpoint.
Yeah, and
Now,
yeah, go ahead, Eddie.
yeah, I have a question, George. Now, as we dive into support, analyzing the growth that you guys have had and diversifying your portfolio, I imagine has also created a larger headache when it comes to support, because now your customer base is much larger, and the topics for support that they're reaching to you guys, it's a lot more things to cover. How does that how do you deal with those challenges?
Yeah, that's a big one. And that's where our ops teams and our tech teams, so myself, I'm from the product team, and I work very closely with my business partners who are the customer service operators, operations teams, whatever you want to call them. We really have to work together and plan both from an online and an online perspective, online representing tech or product and engineering, how we handle this scale, essentially. If you don't have any technological solutions in place, how you solve more customer support tickets is by hiring however many more headcount you need to handle that bandwidth. So that's kind of where my team steps in, is to figure out how we can continue to enable Grab to customer service agents that we have to have inside of one of our facilities, waiting to pick up a phone call or answer an email ticket that comes in.
Now, I see a lot of challenges that can also be driven through this increase in workload, which is, for instance, from one angle, you need to get your team ready, train, and be able to be client facing and perform at the level that can represent the Grab experience. And that training doesn't happen overnight, right? You cannot get someone trained up to speed in 2 days. So how have you match the explosion in operations or the growth in operations compared to the growth in support?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's definitely a topic or something I think about that really helps me or makes me, I really don't have a choice, but to empathize with my customer support partners in the company, my colleagues. Anecdotally, we release a new feature, whether small or large, every 2 days to our customer service team. So what that means is that every 2 days they have to be trained on something new that's coming out. So then you find ways to streamline kind of this rollout process and to scale the delivery of the message of, hey, this is a new feature that's coming out. How do you train 500, 1,000, 1,500 agents, however many agents that we have in one go, so that when this stuff hits the market and the tickets start to build up and come in and flood in, how can we handle support at scale? It's definitely a challenge, and there's a few different ways that you can do it. One of the ways that we've done it is to scale through tech, essentially, and there's different channels that we can use for that. We have an internal communication tool, the internal chat tool that we use to proliferate messaging. We have an internal wiki that we have to post it in case anybody has a question. They can just go to this KB or knowledge base and run a search for keywords, and it'll pop up relevant articles that they can search. And then we have the old school way of training as well, and disseminating information just through your traditional PowerPoints or some type of Google Drive document that gets trained every day or every other day to batches of agents at a time before they go on shift.
Interesting. Now, I imagine this has two angles. The first one being the one you're mentioning right now, the technology. Technology has to be a key point here to amplify the output that you can perform with your team and getting them all up to speed, as you just elaborated. And on the other hand, I believe there's a section or a part that is the culture, right? You mentioned you guys are launching new features every 2 days. So you guys have developed a bit of a culture where you're always constantly learning and being nimble. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, in a industry as competitive or a field as competitive as the one that we're in, we don't really have a choice. If you don't go into areas where you've never been before, if you don't try new things and try to continuously be innovative and roll out features or services or offering, expanding into new countries or new markets and cities, you're not going to last very long, essentially. So I think it's in the core of the DNA of our company, not just on the tech side, but also on the operations side, to constantly try new ways to better serve our customers. We have this mantra internally I think we made this word up, but it's become a part of my vocabulary. It's called outserve. So how can we continuously outserve our customer, going above and beyond their expectations and the other options that they have in the market, so that we become the first thought or the number one option for them when they want to transact in any of the services that we currently offer.
Yeah, that brings up a question on my end, because as you guys know, I have a sales and marketing background as well. Do you ever mix marketing and sales with customer support by potentially giving people offers at the end of a support call and turning a case into an opportunity? Now that you've had a good experience, would you refer a friend? And if you refer a friend, do they get $10 off their first ride? Do you see any of that happening at Grab?
Yeah, so we've always had a referral program where drivers can refer other drivers, passengers can refer other passengers, and once you take that first ride, both sides of that interaction or relationship get some type of incentive. So if I refer a passenger, I'll get a couple bucks into my account or off my next ride. Yeah. And then the same thing for the person that's receiving the referral. They can take a ride and they get a discount on the first X number of rides or first ride. And then on the internal side, to our customer service team, I think the pace of growth that we've been in, it hasn't allowed us to have that as a focus. It's still very reactionary or reactive service at this point. There's a breakage in our perfect customer journey, and a customer has to call customer support to get some type of pain relief. So then we solve that, we offer that pain relief, and then we move on to the next call. But with that said, I think it is a great opportunity, especially now that we've gone into different verticals, vertical being transportation, food, payments, etc. To take this part of our workforce and transition from a reactive type of support mentality to a more proactive type of support. So after offering that pain relief, after the end of that transaction piece, how can we, one, retain this customer, and then two, turn them into an evangelist, essentially. So turn their poor experience into a positive one, so that they go and, one, continue to use our service, and then two, also spread the news of the good service to their friends or network.
Nice. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it even makes me want to rewind, right? Because I think I'm talking with two customer support leaders. Eddie's run teams for Fitbit, AT&T, and Cricket. George has a pretty impressive resume. From my standpoint as a leader of a company, I'm curious to know. You mentioned the word reactive, proactive. Do you find that customer support and that experience is becoming more of a priority as the company grows, or is it something that was ingrained with the current leadership at Grab from day one? And is it kind of maybe a tug of war for attention, in the sense that it becomes more reactive, where there's opportunities probably to grab budget earlier for the technologies and the processes you need? Like, where do you find that culture of support? Do you think it's in the forefront of leaders, or is it still just a secondary thought?
Yeah, it's definitely in the forefront of our leaders' minds. So since day one I joined the company, I've always been focused on operations teams, internal operational efficiency, to kind of sum it up into one line. So what that means is my job was to find places where we were inefficient from an operations standpoint and introduce technology to make us more efficient, essentially, so we can get more output of some kind with the same headcount via technology. Customer support was always one of my internal customers. And then just over time, what we realized was anytime that we went through our prioritization framework, that was just an internal system that we developed to say, okay, if I invest this amount of our tech resources, engineering, product design, and we get this solution, this is what we can expect in return. This is the impact that we can expect back, how much money we can save, or how much revenue we can generate, et cetera. Many different metrics or lens that we can look through to determine that ROI, that return on investment. Mm-hmm. And what we found out over my first few quarters in Grab was that customer support kept bubbling to the top, the highest ROI, the highest places for impact and ROI, where we would invest our resourcing, we can get the most returns back. Just kept bubbling up to customer support. And then over the quarters, that percentage of my portfolio that was customer support continued to grow. So actually earlier this year, with the blessings of our founders, Anthony Tan and Huiling Pan, we spun off a subset of my team to make them dedicated and primarily focused just on the customer support space. And then to answer your question about kind of the investment piece. So the investment's always been there, but even with that investment there and that commitment, there's a bit of a tug of war because every company goes through these resourcing challenges where you only have a finite number of resources that you have, and there's certain corporate or company goals that you want to achieve. You want to roll out a new vertical, launch a new country. It takes people, it takes engineers, it takes ops teams, it takes designers and PMs, product managers to get this done. So it's a constant internal battle for me as well, even though we have a dedicated team to look at customer success. And it's a balance at a leadership level to say, okay, if we invest this fixed amount into customer support, this is what it's going to cost us in terms of growth, and vice versa. If we invest in growth, then you're going to have to give a bit on the back end and take a hit on the customer support side as well.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And
Interesting.
yeah, I'm sure you see the world's becoming more competitive and customers are becoming more demanding.
Now,
yeah, absolutely. You see this if you run any CSAT or NPS surveys. For the most part, if you don't invest in your customer service part of your user journey, you're going to be in the red. You're going to have negative NPS, negative CSAT.
Yep. Eddie,
100%.
what were you going to say?
Yes. Now, George, you mentioned you had product development. Working, as you just mentioned, working with support is fundamental. There are support cases that you will have eventually. For instance, you mentioned earlier having a dispute for a charge on a ride, on a taxi ride, etc. Those are things that you will eventually need support for. But there are other instances where the drivers for support are, for instance, lack of product development. Like, I don't know where can I set up my account, or how should I add my credit card. Those are things that your product should be well developed enough to streamline those operations in order to avoid creating tickets or support cases for that. Tell us about working with the support team and heading product development to mitigate or reduce the amount of cases for features in the service, for app development, etc.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think you just hit on the crux of why this team even exists in Grab. So we look at customer support as one kind of that last line of defense once there's a service failure. So you have this concept of perfect journeys in any organization, any company, any service, any product that you offer to a customer. You should have defined what your happy and unhappy paths are, what your perfect user journey, what your perfect customer journey looks like as they use your service or your product. So customer support should become a signal back to your development teams, back to your product teams or your designers, to kind of put a spotlight or highlight where those service failures are. When you start to see support tickets start to bubble up in a certain area, it's a sign to kind of take a look at that area and see how you can fix this, what I call upstream. So upstream in the development cycle means at the app side, at the website, at the service level. And then hopefully once you get that fixed upstream, it no longer flows downstream to customer support, where customer support's at the end of the line. And then working with tech teams to introduce tech to solve this as well, so that we can handle support at scale. As we were growing in the early days, it made sense to hire more headcount because the number of tickets were manageable. But we've kind of hit that tipping point in the past year and a half or so, where the ticket volume has become so big, it no longer makes financial sense to just hire more people to solve this problem, because with more people come more licensing costs for any third-party software that you use. It'll increase the stress on your internal engineering and development teams as well. You have to hire more people to manage the internal systems, which we have plenty of as well. You'll have to get additional facilities because you have to house these people somewhere. And this is all on top of the base salary that they're going to earn, and the base compensation that they have. So what type of technology can you introduce to help out on the downstream workflows, while the upstream folks, the people that are upstream, are starting to work these solutions into their roadmap? So this is kind of where self-service comes in, this concept of self-service. And it's actually a two-part win. I look at self-service as a two-part win. It's good for the customers because it puts the control of that support journey, that perfect support journey. How can we deliver this pain relief to our customers in such a perfect way that they come into us unhappy and they leave us happily? And self-service, I think, is a big part of that. And the reason for that is because then the customer determines on their time when they want to engage with us, when they want to give us information, so that we can help them solve their problem. And then internally, because it's self-service, that reduces the operational load or the operational need for that one-to-one interaction between a support agent and one of our customers that are calling out to us for help.
Interesting. Nowadays, I believe you guys, of course, it's a proven model. You guys have proven your growth by listening to your customers and, as you just said, developing your product to be able to service your customer needs. Now, in the past, this has been a challenge, having visibility as to what is driving my customers to reach out to support. Having that visibility has always been key for decision making. Today, it's a little bit easier because you have tools and technology that can give you those insights. But at the same time, I want to ask you, George, as a leader, there may be instances where you want to go with your intuition, with your gut as to, hey, I think this should be developed. But at the same time, you just mentioned that a lot of the developments in the platform are driven from customer requests. How do you balance those challenges between what you feel should be developed and, of course, the cost of opportunity of your team? They cannot work on all the initiatives that they wish they could. So how do you balance that, what customers want versus what you feel customers are going to need?
Yeah, it's always a balance. I think this is a challenge that every product manager faces. It's more of an art than a science in determining what products to build. There's two sides to it. There's, like you mentioned, your customers telling you what they want. And then the other side is you telling the customers what they need, which they don't even realize that they need at the time. Good examples of this would be like an Apple. They've been rolling out products for decades, which at the time doesn't make sense. And then now that we look back, it's something that we can no longer live with. So it's a balance that we face internally. How do we put these requests through our prioritization framework where we try to treat it like a science, but then you have this either your gut feeling or you get feedback from your customers, and it just makes sense that one feature that keeps coming up that doesn't have quantifiable impact or metrics, but it just makes sense and it should be prioritized over other things. So we do make room for those type of features as well. We call those strategic bets. So it's something that we think is going to move the needle, but it's just a bit difficult to quantify at the time as we're going through our quarterly planning, going through our prioritization framework, impact over cost analysis.
Interesting. Now, sitting for a couple more seconds on that visibility topic, as you guys diversify and expand your portfolio of services and expand into more verticals, how are you guys keeping up and maintaining that visibility as to what customers need in each one of those verticals and be able to deliver improvements on those?
Yeah, I think this is a huge challenge for any organization that hits hypergrowth and gets to a certain scale across the board, volume of transactions, number of headcount. It's very easy to get further and further, literally and figuratively away from your customers. So another one of the mantras that we have in Grab is to go out on the ground. So we encourage all of our people from leadership down to middle management, down to the lower tiers of the company, to constantly just stay in touch with our customers, communicate with the drivers. All of us use the Grab service, whether it's transport, Grab Pay, which is one of our financial products, or Grab Food, which is our food delivery service. We communicate with those delivery people, those drivers. We talk to our fellow people in our network that use the services as well, some of the other customers, to really keep a pulse on the ground. And that's kind of the one-to-one interactions that we push for and we leverage. We also have in-app feedback that comes in-app CSAT, so that we know at a transactional level, how are we serving you today? Where did something go wrong? How can we do better? We run quarterly NPS surveys where we do sample size across the region and the thousands or tens of thousands of respondees per survey that we run, so that we can get an idea of across the board, not just support, but even driver sign up, passenger sign up, onboarding, offboarding of customers. How are we doing on those? So we do the best that we can to kind of keep a pulse of how the services that we're offering fit into the market, so that we can constantly kind of pivot, adjust, optimize the services that we offer.
And George, how many countries are you guys currently operating in?
We're now in eight countries. When I joined, we were in 5 or 6, I believe. So we've been able to launch a couple countries since I joined. I think we were under 100 cities when I joined, and the last number I heard was about 225.
Yeah, because this is, that was a good topic that you guys were just discussing. And then in the back of my mind, I'm saying, how does this roll up to, multi-country, approach? Is everything, are you guys looking at Grab as one organization, one customer base, one NPS score, or are you dividing that, product and SPS per region and seeing differences? Because it's, one region I would imagine can pull you in a different direction based on just, cultural behaviors and how they operate. So it sounds like another layer of complexity.
Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely. So we operate as one brand of Grab across the region, across Southeast Asia. But effectively, you have 8 sub units or sub businesses that run because the markets are so different. Even language, English is not the primary language in all the countries that we operate in. I think we have 4 or 5 different primary languages across the 8 countries that we operate in. And then tying that back to customer success, you have to have, because of these language differences, you have to have customer service agents on the ground, or if they're going to be remote in a different country, they have to have that local language support for the country that they're serving in. There are areas of opportunity for some type of consolidation across the English-speaking markets, but the ones that where English is not the primary language, it becomes a bit more challenging. You have to find different ways or get a bit creative because customer service in most companies is a cost center. So at some point, cost becomes a factor that you have to control. So you have to get a bit creative within those markets to keep a cap on your OpEx.
Now, to take Amir's question a step further, you were mentioning a couple seconds ago, George, that staying in touch with your customers is key, and you guys promote that across all levels of hierarchy, listening to what the customers are saying. But at the same time, for you guys to be able to maintain hyper growth, you need to have very solid foundations. And very solid foundations usually means very good processes with rules, boundaries, and how do you guys usually when you develop these foundations, that means establishing, in a sense, bureaucracy, right? You will have a process that is replicable and scalable to make things happen. But at the same time, you need to act quickly on customer feedback. How do you navigate around making things happen quickly for customers versus sticking to your rules, your boundaries, your processes established to support that growth?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge to stay agile, stay active to accommodate what the market is saying versus what we want to push out across the region. So typically what we see is if we try to establish processes at a regional level and push this out blanket across the organization or across the 8 markets that we operate in. If we've done everything right, then a regional rollout goes smoothly, but that's usually not the case because the markets are quite unique and there's different challenges on the ground. So what ends up happening and kind of the underlying or the backbone of what enables this is communication. So people in Indonesia talk to people in Singapore talk to people in Malaysia, etc. So that the best ideas kind of get floated around, say, hey, this is an issue that we saw pop up here. Kind of keep a lookout on this in your market as well. You may see this. This is how we triage this issue. This is how we managed to build a new SOP, kind of pivoting away from the original one, or if nothing existed to begin with, operational standpoint. And then when we see these operational processes replicate across enough markets, that's usually where the light bulb goes off and becomes something that we prioritize into our backlog on the tech side as well. Because if it's operational, it can be repeated by a person. That usually means a computer or some type of bot can be introduced to do the same thing.
Yeah, and that brings up
when,
RPA, robotic process automation. I don't know much about it. I'm not an expert, but maybe you do. Are you looking at any RPA providers, or have you done any research in that area?
Yeah, we've talked to a couple of vendors, and while we're evaluating vendors, we have engineering resources as well that's dedicated to this team, and we think it's a pretty good investment of our time so that we can continue to grow the customer support capabilities internally, while, again, as I mentioned earlier, not having to grow that headcount as well. So what that means is when we look at the ticket, what we call dispositions, other people call them categories or ticket types. These are how we classify the tickets that come in, what the issue the customer is calling about. When we see certain areas grow large enough and we can get a deep enough understanding of a replicable SOP, standard operating procedure, that's kind of where we introduce those scripts. So we'll write a script to say, okay, if this is the issue that comes in, this is the customer persona or profile that's requesting it, whether it's a driver, passenger, or a food/pay merchant. These are the rules of fill in the blank. If it's a refund, these are the rules of the refund, rules of engagement. And then it's essentially just business rules. It's a if then else statement, essentially.
Mhm.
So if your customer is a platinum passenger, which is the highest tier that we have, and they haven't requested a refund in the past 30 days and they're requesting one now, let's set a limit on that refund and fire one off to them. And this is kind of what you have to figure out as a customer service organization. Does it cost less to automate that refund with some type of cap in place so that we don't get gamed or there's not any fraudulent activity or abuse on our system?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is, you know, I use Uber in the States, right? And if I get a fee for cancellation, I usually will challenge that with one of the automated questions. You know, do you have a problem with your cancellation fee? Yes, I do. My driver showed up at the wrong location, and then they refund you automatically. So this sounds like the similar rules where it's, you know, if this, then that, and it probably sounds to me like, you know, companies like Grab and Uber make a decision that if this scenario happens, it makes more sense to refund the client versus spending the time to research who was at fault, almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Those calls that last 10 minutes don't always last 10 minutes. Sometimes it requires a callback. And
Yeah.
in the period in between the callback, your agents are off researching, trying to look up in one of your internal databases, looking in the wiki to see what the rules for engagement are. It could end up taking you hours to solve a $5 problem.
Yeah,
That's
and
probably not the
I've been
best use of
guilty.
your agent's time.
I've been guilty of, you know, missing my Uber ride and then saying the Uber never showed up or something, right? And you know, I'll be the guy talking to customer support, holding to my story. Not proud to say it. So yeah, I can see how that makes a lot of sense from an operational standpoint.
Yeah.
Pick your battles, right?
Yeah, I must say Uber's customer support, in-app customer support is fantastic. It's top notch. They've done a good job at handling support at scale from the very beginning. So if you haven't noticed, Uber doesn't actually have a call center.
Yep.
So all of their customer support agents are digitally based or digitally focused. So they only handle emails and chat tickets.
Yeah, and bringing up Uber, do you look at other so-called competitors more as colleagues in the industry, and do you ever communicate with other colleagues that work in the industry and chat about these topics?
Usually not directly. I think most companies don't want to share too much kind of how they're doing it. But whatever is publicly available is available to all, right? So we can always take a look to kind of keep a pulse on what's going on in the market, how other people are doing it. Another really good example of who's done customer support well at scale is Amazon. If you ever go through Amazon's support or self-help center requesting a refund, requesting a return, it's fantastic. It's very contextual, highly personalized. Every click that you do makes sense so that you're not just kind of bouncing around between their different offerings and support. It's usually applicable to the reason why you're entering their support journey.
Yeah, no, and I work with both those companies, and I love their support experience, and we learn from them as well as we CloudTask prepare to deliver top-notch support and success. You know, we look around and see some good experiences that we like to replicate. And I don't want to jump around this conversation. Eddie, anything on top of your mind that you want to jump in, or?
Of course, I want to jump into the future. I want to learn what do you have in mind to
He's living in the
continue
future. I love it.
to keep up with the growth that you're going to have in support. I believe Grab is going to continue to expand. I've seen how you guys have grown. There's no indication that you guys are going to stop anytime soon. So what are you looking in when it comes to technologies? I know there's a lot of AI in the buzz right now, a lot of machine learning. What does the future hold for Grab, George? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that's the some of the words that you mentioned there are the big moonshot for not just us but technology in general. Can AI / machine learning / bots get to the level where they can replicate a humanistic conversation, where they can replicate a human essentially? Can you program a machine to the level where it can handle all the different permutations of how you can ask a simple question? Can you factor in colloquial slang? Can you factor in different language support? I think we're a bit away from that. At Grab, we are investing some in that area, but while we make that investment, which is going to take time for the tech to get to that level, we are taking a more I don't want to call it rudimentary, but it is rudimentary compared to something such as AI or a complex chatbot, such as a Google Assistant or Amazon Alexa, Siri, etc. Where those companies have literally thousands of engineers that have been working on it for years now to get it to the level that it's at now. We're taking that robotic process approach to it, where we can programmatically determine based off of the data that we have on hand already, because we have historical tickets, we have an idea of where the volume of tickets lie, where the pockets of trouble that we see in our product lie. We can take that as a starting point and then build automated processes around that to handle support.
Now, you guys can hear me, right? I don't know if we talked about this, but I think you guys use Zendesk, correct?
That's right. We're currently a Zendesk customer.
So do you look at your technology ecosystem to be, to be leaders in pointing you in the right directions for the new technologies of the future, or do you search separately in the sense that's like, is it what is Zendesk, who is Zendesk partnering with, how are they going to build out the platform, or do you have your eyes on the whole market?
I guess both. So we work really closely with Zendesk. They power our, I guess we use a few different vendors, but they power our ticketing solution piece of the customer support portfolio. And then we have some vendors that handle some of the other parts like telephony, et cetera, workforce management. So we work really closely and we keep a close eye on kind of what Zendesk is up to and what their planned roadmap is for the next year, that we're going to possibly use some of the products that they have upcoming and how we can integrate those upcoming offerings into how we want to handle support as well. So I know they're doing a lot of stuff with chat. They made an acquisition a few years ago of this company called Zopim to beef up their chat services, and they're introducing automations and some type of bot capabilities in that chat as well. So how can we leverage that chat bot so that we can, or that chat offering, so that we can increase the efficiency of our internal agents? Because with chat or with a phone call, you're tied time-wise one-to-one. It's a one-to-one mapping. 1 minute of a agent's time is the same as 1 minute of a customer's time. But when you move over to medium like chat, the agent then can handle a few different chats at a time. And then it's up to us to determine what type of efficiency we want to see, because the more chats that you have running concurrently, typically the longer your resolution time becomes. So then that becomes a strategy decision that you have to make with your business partners, your customer service business partners, to say, okay, if you want your agent to handle more tickets, that means the customer has to wait a bit longer so that the agent can get back to them because they're handling 5, 6, 7 other chats at the same time.
Yep. And what's the acceptable threshold? So right now, you guys are on the channel. Let's go over those channels, right? Do you guys have phone support, or is it mainly chat and ticketing and email?
Yeah. So actually, this question reminds me of how we kind of started this conversation, which is what has been one of the main drivers behind Grab's growth. And I think on the customer side, and when I say customer, I mean the people that are taking the rides, the passengers, as well as the drivers as well. We've always maintained a very high touch approach to them. We've always wanted to give them the opportunity to speak with a human on the other end of the phone in case any issues have come up. That generally remains the case on the driver side. We show our drivers a lot of love. On the passenger side, I think we've moved away a bit from phone and trying to give them more digital options. And I think in general that makes sense. The drivers that we have are a bit more traditional in terms of technology, whereas the passengers are a bit further along in their mobile journey, I guess, if you want to call it that, mobile penetration, mobile journey, tech savviness. So we want to offer them more on the email side, more on the self-help, more on the knowledge-based side, the articles that we show in our help center. And then recently this year, we're moving into chat as well.
Interesting. And from a consumer standpoint, I also agree that would make a lot of sense. From a customer standpoint, I treat or the engagement with the company, I would imagine, is more transactional, and therefore an option where you can have more self-service or easy access, where you don't have to wait until you reach a human to get something solved is much faster. But on the driver side, you're an employee of a company. You want to hear more support. You want to hear more engagement with the company you work for. Therefore, a human touch is going to be more needed there, I imagine. Right, George?
Yeah, that's right. And then So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's more of a partnership with the driver side. And that's why we do show them so much love, because we want to keep them happy and keep them gainfully employed through their earnings that they make on our platform, so they continue to drive and continue to outserve our paying customers that are taking the rides or ordering the food or ordering the package. And not just that, is there's actually quite a very practical reason for why drivers want to call us so much. Because if they're driving, you're essentially building a product for a one-handed person. One hand's on the steering wheel, the other hand's on the phone. So you don't want a driver to be texting while they're operating a vehicle.
Interesting. Now, George, you mentioned you started with the company about 2 to 3 years ago. Am I correct?
Just over 2 years ago. Yeah.
Interesting. So I see you guys are mainly, or your services are mainly B2C. I imagine you may have some B2B services, but bottom line, when it comes to support, there's a lot of theories that say, hey, in the end, we're just human to human, right? No matter if you're speaking with a business, whomever you are, you're always going to have a decision maker. There's always going to be human. Now, what have been the greatest learnings by being in Grab, working in Grab, and seeing this, again, human to human interactions? What have been your greatest discoveries, findings that Grab has helped you realize? Either about your consumer behavior, employees' behavior, managing your teams.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from this journey at Grab is to always maintain, regardless of at what stage of your organization you're in, at what stage of the career you're in, how many people you have on your team that you're managing, direct reports or indirect reports, to always keep your customer first. Always stay laser focused on your customer, offering them the best value for whatever they're giving you in exchange, whether it's time, emotion, some type of financial transaction. You should be, your goals, your North Star should always be delivering that value to your customers. And we see that through Grab, all the way from the top down to the bottom. Our leaders, our founders are still out there on the ground. They're going to Jakarta. They're spending week in, week out. I mentioned Jakarta because Indonesia is our biggest market. And that's generally the case for most companies that operate in Southeast Asia, because Indonesia is the fourth most populated country in the world. Mm-hmm. So really staying focused on the customer, because once you lose sight of that, I think that kind of muddles things for you internally. It changes how you prioritize, changes where you make your investments, kind of take your eye off the ball if you lose sight of who your customers are and what they want.
Now, to get a little bit more into the details, George, we've heard multiple times, yes, keeping your customers in the forefront is key. For someone listening right now, let's say someone heading support, someone heading product development, what would be a recommendation to again, align with the goal of being customer-centric? What would be some best practices or recommendations? And let's talk something more tangible, either a technology that you would recommend in a specific setup or a process.
So I'd recommend, I guess it depends on the segment that we're addressing. If it's a early stage startup or company that's just getting started, that's offering some type of service that could possibly have a service failure and you need support, definitely focus on support from day one. I think it's a lot easier to build up a support org from a headcount perspective, from a process perspective, from an implementations perspective, from choosing your software products and how you're going to set that up, and how you're going to do ticket routing and queuing, and how you're going to assign the tickets to different agents so that's best served. It's a lot easier to handle that stuff, one, when you're not overloaded with tickets and just kind of overstretched and overworked. And you build that foundation so that you can go through scale and your support can grow in a way that makes sense, as opposed to growing horizontally by just hiring people, or growing linearly rather. Meaning if your ride, in our case, our ride volume increases by 10x, that means in the old times or olden days, we would also have to increase our support headcount by 10x as well. So anybody that's just getting started, that'd probably be my biggest piece of advice. And then for people that kind of more established, that are going through some sort of digital transformation, and ironically, that's kind of what Grab is going through at this point, even though we are at our core transport / technology company. We take a very traditional approach to customer support. So we're kind of going through a digital transformation stage or phase at this time. Really So what I mentioned earlier, staying to the ground, the reason why that's important is because then your product leadership, your design leadership, your engineering leadership, they have a firsthand experience or account of what our operations partners, what our customer support agents are going through, the pain that they feel. And then that's actually just a proxy for what the real pain is, which is what the customers are feeling. People are calling us thousands of times a day, emailing us thousands of times a day with some type of problem. And if you're not on the ground to really understand what's going on, you'll never kind of take that back back with you to your day job when you're building product or building a new type of system or database. You don't kind of factor in those ops pains and the customer pains that we have. So really staying connected, staying on the ground, keeping a pulse of what's going on, so that you can prioritize accordingly and allocate the necessary bandwidth to prevent or solve these problems.
Interesting. Now, I have another question. When it comes to, let's take this to another realm, which is the realm of outsourcing. A lot of the things you mentioned means doing things in-house, listening to your customers, to stay close to them so you know how to react. And companies like ourselves at CloudTask, we specialize in certain verticals because, as you just mentioned, you guys have grown, you guys have multiple verticals, multiple services, and diversified portfolio. That brings a lot of headaches. Ideally, outsourcing allows people or companies to specialize and provide that service in a more cost-effective and specialized way with much better outcomes. What would you recommend for someone that is looking to outsource their customer support, either the department or part of their roles, into a company like CloudTask? What would you recommend them to look for? Either KPIs, previous experiences. What would be your recommendation?
Yeah, I would probably look at a few things. One is the relationship. So as we mentioned earlier on this call, we're still in a human-to-human interaction. And if you're going to outsource such an important part of your one operations team and to your user journey, so support is a part of that user journey. In the happy path, it never gets engaged. In the unhappy path, support kind of steps in to save the day. That's the ideal world that we operate in any business. So that's why that relationship is so important. You need a trusted partner that you can really look to and say, okay, I'm going to hand this off to you, and I trust you completely, wholly to handle this. And then you have to define kind of the parameters of that engagement, what the agreement is. So in our case, we do some outsourcing as well, and it has to be clearly defined which issues are handled, what boundaries are set, I guess, what are the upper bounds of what that outsourced company can do in terms of fill in the blank, whether it's a refund, giving access to certain information, exposing customer information, etc. And then what that handover mechanism becomes, because there are going to be escalations that happen. What are the escalation paths? If that BPO can't handle a certain type of issue, or the issue is too complex, how does that ticket then get routed to, in this case, a Grab internal customer service agent, so they can handle it. So we kind of differentiate between T1 and tier 1 and tier 2 agents. So how does a call go from a T1 agent to a T2 agent in a smooth way, so that we don't break that journey for the customer? It's not ideal if it turns into a callback. Ideally, it's a seamless transfer, right? Exactly.
A good handoff. Now let's say there's a leader listening to us out there, and you mentioned a key part of that decision is building that trust, or working with a vendor that provides you with that peace of mind and trust. What would be your recommendation for a leader looking to start that engagement with an outsourced company, and let's say they are not yet very familiar with the different companies that can provide these type of services? Where would you point them, besides, of course, CloudTask website?
Yeah, of course. Would send them to you guys first. Where would I point them? I guess leverage the network. So talk to other people in the industry, other people that kind of have worked in these relationships or engagements before, to kind of get an idea of how to operate with an outsourced company. And it's not just tied to the customer support space. I mean, you can outsource almost anything these days, right? So that type of experience, I think that experience is transferable if you want to take that experience and move it to customer support. I think once the working relationship is established, after you kind of go through a couple of trials, if that's what's necessary to do your evaluation, really forging a strong relationship through communication, transparency, periodic check-ins, maybe even going as far as embedding, whether that's an outsourced agent sitting in your call center or somebody in your call center that sits in the outsource center, so that flow of information is seamless. Essentially, you become one brand, and that's how you should be operating anyway. When a customer calls for support, and if they get routed to a BPO or to an internal full-time employee of your company, they shouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. The representatives that you have on the end of the phone, regardless of who's cutting the check for them, should represent the company in the same way.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's something that's on the forefront of my mind and our minds. I would say is matching the culture and making sure that you're one team. Something that's definitely very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Eddie, it's interesting. We've talked for some time. George, we asked you a lot of questions, and you had a lot of straightforward answers, and it's great to connect with a customer support leader like yourself. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know that Eddie has a strong background in Fitbit and AT&T. We didn't get to hear much about how support was handled there versus Grab, but I think we could save something for the next time that we talk. But I definitely really appreciate you connecting with us, and I look forward to watching your career evolve as a leader. And hopefully seeing you at some of these events like Zendesk conferences and Gainsight, hopefully giving some speeches and talking about the subjects that we talked about now, because I think that with this big push in customer support and customer success, leaders like you and Eddie are now in the forefront of CEOs' minds, and it's amazing to hear some of the things that are going on in the industry with technology and processes and outsourced, insourced. There's a lot of tools at your guys' disposal, more than ever before, for you guys to get the brand and the customer experience to match the voice of the companies. And it's just exciting to see this space continue to evolve. Eddie, anything to add before we wrap this up with George?
I think you said it all, Amir. Just keep your customers at the front. That's going to be a fundamental change for a lot of companies. That means that now sales, marketing, everybody else has to listen to what the guys in support back in their cubicles have to say about their customers. They are vouching for customers. They take the customer side, and they're going to be the ones speaking up into what customers want. Listening to those guys is going to be fundamental now. George, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure to speak.
I got one request, George, from you. One request. All right?
All right, shoot.
I want a referral code for Grab so that when I come visit you in Singapore, I can get a discount on my first ride. All right?
You got it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for everybody's time today. I look forward to getting this out to the audience so that they can learn from it and ask us questions. George, Eddie, thank you both again for your time.
Likewise. Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, George. You have a great day.